not to individual committee members or to others in attendance. Please refer to me as Madam Chairman. Also, Chairman or Chairwoman are acceptable ways to address me. Comments will be directed to the issue under discussion by the committee, and distracting comments on unrelated side issues are out of order. I may impose time limits from time to time as we go through our bills. If we're getting short on time and we want to still hear people, there may be time limits imposed. I hope that we never have to do that, but it's a possibility. We will allow Zoom testimony in our meetings, and citizens who want to testify by Zoom must sign up by 10 a.m. the day of the meeting. Amendments that are thought of before the meeting should be written, and 11 copies should be provided for our staff for distribution to the committee. On occasions, we will have amendments that are developed over the course of our discussion on the bill. These amendments do not need to be written, but the staff will write those down. An example would be a change of an enactment clause or some other minor change that we're looking at. Generally, the order of testimony will be the sponsor and the presenter of the bill, and then we'll have state agencies, legislators, local government, and then public testimony from the people in the room, and then we will have Zoom testimony from the people on Zoom. And Wyoming citizens will go first on Zoom, and then non-Wyoming citizens would go second. As we go through our meetings, I would like the committee members to think about interim topics and jot those down. Toward the end of the session, we will gather those ideas. Also, in my committee meeting yesterday, I had an email from a citizen that said that their votes were hard to hear online. So if you could turn your microphone on when you vote, that would be helpful. Then we can go ahead with roll call.
Representative Angelos. Representative Burkhart.
Here.
Representative Byron.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Singh.
Here.
Representative Storer.
Here.
Vice Chairman Western.
Here.
Representative Winter.
Here.
Madam Chairman Newsom.
Here.
Thank you.
So we're starting with House Bill 48. I'm going to ask the folks from WYDOT and the folks from State Parks to go over. Do you guys have a preference who starts this? Do you want to start it, Sandra? Or why don't, yeah, everybody can go. That'd be great. So whoever wants to start.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. Dave Glenn, Deputy Director of Wyoming State Parks, Historic Sites and Trails. If it would be your pleasure, I'm happy to kind of walk you through the bill.
That would be great. Thank you.
Fantastic. House Bill 48, it's a pretty straightforward bill. It appropriates $40 million from the general fund, starting from the effective date, and it ends June 30th of 2025. Any of the unexpended funds go back from this appropriation revert after June 30th on that date. 90% of those funds appropriated go to WYDOT, and those funds are used to provide grants provided in the subsection below, but not more than 7% can be used for administrative purposes. It would be administered, those grants would be administered in the same manner as the current Transportation Alternative Grant Program. They'd be available to an agency, instrumentality, or political subdivision of the state. They would also require at least a 20% match from the applicant on those. Moving on to page 3, they would only be available for the following eligible projects: shared use pathways or greenways, safe pedestrian and bicycle routes to schools, bicycle path networks and existing roads, sidewalks and crosswalks, networks, projects to develop a walkable Main Street corridor, or for active transportation plans that encourage increased transportation by walking or bicycling. 10%, or $4 million, is appropriated to the Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources, and the funds are used to provide grants of not more than, to provide grants as provided in the subsection below, but not more than 7% can be available for administrative purposes in the grants program. The grants would be administered in the same as the current Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Grant Program, and the grants would be available to an agency, instrumentality, or political subdivision of the state, require that 20% match, and also These grants would be specific for natural surface trails, including trails for hiking, horseback riding, or mountain biking, or for the planning of those types of trails. That's kind of it in a nutshell, and I apologize, I should have introduced the other players at the table. We have the Director of WYDOT, Luke Reiner here, Sandra Sanderson, Special Projects, and then we have Patrick Harrington here from Wyoming State Parks that heads up our Outdoor Recreation Office.
So Sandra, if you would like to tell us kind of the background of how WYDOT grants work, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Newsom and committee. The Transportation Alternatives Program is a program that WYDOT administers. We receive $5 million from FHWA. It goes to pathways and trails and other small construction projects that are related to vulnerable users, such as walkers, strollers, those in wheelchairs, within communities for the most part. It requires a sponsor, so a city or county would have to sponsor and put up a match in order to be eligible for those projects. And one of the, I think you'll probably see a changed version of the bill in front of you. And two of the things that we would request maybe change in is the match, because our match is 10%. So our match for communities is 10%. And originally we had 20% in this bill. And one of the challenges we've heard from communities is coming up with that match is a challenge. So keeping it at 10% would be ideal. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. So the bill that Barb just gave us is the revised bill with the 10% match language instead of the 20% match. And that would have to come through an amendment for this to be enacted.
Madam Chairwoman,
Thank you.
there was a second change as well, and that was to the effective date. We received $5 million in TAP dollars, and to administer these dollars over 2 years will be somewhat of a challenge. So to be able to start immediately or effective earlier would be ideal.
Anything else? Any questions from the committee? Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I didn't quite catch that number. You said the STIP and TAP grants that you got? How much was it?
We received roughly $5 million annually from FHWA for the Transportation Alternatives Program. Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So, Mr. Glenn, do people who do bicycles, horses, hiking boots, do they pay any sort of use taxes for the use of these?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Burkhart, no, they don't, unless they're going to a place that charges a fee. So to come to a state park to hike our trails, you would need to pay an entrance fee to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Storer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Hi, Director Reiner and Sandra. I didn't get your last name. I'm sorry.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Sanderson.
Sanderson. Thank you
yes.
very much. My question is just if you're getting $5 million a year from the federal funds, will these state funds be to augment those funds? And will it be seen? Will those be available as meeting the match for the federal funds?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Storer, yes.
Ms. Sanderson.
Thank you. Yes, it would absolutely augment that. We had $24.4 million in unfunded projects from fiscal year 2023. I also know that Wyoming Pathways has done a survey to assess communities and find out what their need is for the pathways. So the need exists for both the paved surface and the natural surface trails. And I'm sorry, the second question was?
Just that would the state money meet the match that the federal funds require?
The state money could meet the match for the federal funds, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question on what's your process for ensuring communities across Wyoming will know about this grant and have access to it? Just like, for example, if Green River knew about it, but Rock Springs didn't, do you reach out to all communities and provide a good effort of making sure they know about this type of grant funding?
Ms. Sanderson?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Larson, absolutely. When we post for the,
Can you pull your mic a little closer?
sorry, absolutely, yes, the opportunity for those funds become available publicly, and we post it on our website. We reach out to folks. We work with a lot of user groups as well to let them know that they are coming, that the dollars are coming, and they can propose, they can submit a proposal.
Director Reiner?
Madam Chairman, with your permission, what Ms. Sanderson said is exactly correct. Maybe to expand on that just a bit about some of the logic in the proposed amendment we had. One, as we look at this big picture of $40 million, first, we would certainly thank you, for being willing to augment and put that into this alternate transportation, because certainly we see that as key and critical to how we play, how we work, how our communities, work and evolve and live. But it all takes time. And so to your question is a good one about what's the process to get to a project. And it takes a while to put out, hey, we're interested in doing projects, and send in your proposals, and then we evaluate it. As we look at the timeline, 24 months really is what's in the bill. One of our concerns was making efficient use of the money. And so based on what Ms. Sanderson said about, yeah, we'll advertise, and we have a really good process to do that, but it does take some time. And so that was really the thought process behind asking for an immediately effective date versus 1 July, so we can start that process and get it going and make sure that the money is obligated in the 24 months that we have to make sure we make good use of the money.
Thank you. Representative Singh?
Madam Chair, how is it that we arrived at 7% for the administrative costs?
Anybody want to take that?
Madam Chair, I'm not completely familiar with the origins of the bill, but that was inherited when it came from Roscoe and then was presented at TRW, that 7% was in there.
Representative Singh, we will have former Representative Jim Roscoe, who originally started this bill, on Zoom, and he can probably answer that question for you. Director Glenn, or?
Madam Chairman, I would suggest taking a look at and Representative Singh at the fiscal note too. I can't speak for YDOT. We have a robust granting program in place. I think we're looking at $6,000 for us to implement this. So that not more than 7%. Our job is to get the money on the ground. And that's what we do. We've got staff in place to do that. So it's really not, from the trails perspective, it's really not going to cost us that much money to do it.
Thank you. Director
Madam
Reiner?
Chair, just to address that a bit, and again, I'd be happy to hear from Representative Roscoe. What I would tell you is that in terms of staffing in our department, when you go from $5 million, which we currently do, to $40 million, actually it'd be more, right? Because you got to add the 5 million to it. It's a significant event, and there is some administrative burden that's required. And so I would say that in the formation of this bill, the 7% is probably a fairly standard percentage of you could say up to that. Quite frankly, we'll be in the business of hiring consultants to help us do this. We are not, currently staffed to do it. So we just work it, but there is some expense to getting it out the door as required.
Any other questions? Representative Storer?
Madam Chairwoman, Deputy Director Glenn, maybe you could tell, because we have a lot of new members on this committee, including me, but I'm a little bit familiar with the program you guys are currently administering using ARPA funds that's similar to this. And just tell us a little bit about what that process has been and what the interest has been across the state would be helpful, I think.
Great. Madam Chairman?
Director Glenn?
Representative Storer, thank you, because I was trying to raise my hand because I had a couple of comments to throw out there as well. in the last year, we received about $12 million to be granted out for outdoor recreation infrastructure. And this was not trails, just trails. This was potentially shooting ranges, potentially any outdoor recreation infrastructure, shower houses, all kinds of applications came in, golf courses. Out of that 72 million, a little more than half came in as requests for trails, $31 million on that piece. Trails are probably the biggest requested item that we get at state parks. An example, Patrick here used to actually be the superintendent at Kurt Gowdy. 2008, we had visitation of 50,000 people at Kurt Gowdy. We started building trails there. People came for the trails. We have 518,000 people last year. 60% of those people came for the trails. We also have a lot of community collaboratives that are out there in the state. Many of you have heard of those. We've got 7 collaboratives throughout the state. There's elected officials on those collaboratives, there's businesses, there's NGOs. And what we want, we don't parachute in. We want them to come to us and we help them, we facilitate them building a plan on what they want and don't want for outdoor recreation in their community. Trails are usually one of the higher things that are out there. There's data, and I've got tons of it, that shows the revenues that come into local communities for outdoor recreation and trails. Oregon, they did a study, $116 per person per day, and an average of $744 per trip. It's not my thing, it's Patrick's, but their family throws bikes on the cars and goes down to Colorado and spends a week and goes mountain biking. Montana, $76 per person. Jackson, they did one that was $168 per person spent for trails. So by building those, we're helping, we're reaching our goals and our mission of improving communities and enriching lives as we're moving forward. And I want to make one really quick clarification, I think. When we talk pathways and trails, sometimes people get those confused. And the way I define it, I'd love to hear from YDOT, how you define it, the difference between a pathway and a trail. A trail we look at is on a natural surface, costs about $20 a foot to $50 a foot, depending on the location that you're in. But the way we define a pathway is usually something a bike or you could push a stroller along. That's how we kind of break that piece up. We worked very closely with you on this in the interim committee, so I would stand for any other questions, but I just wanted to throw those out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Angeles.
Madam Chairwoman, and I thank you for coming. I know that can be kind of daunting to come in front of a committee. So I have a question. You received 32 million out of ARPA funds for trails. Is that correct? Is that the way I'm understanding that?
Just under $32 million in requests.
Okay.
Yes.
So you haven't actually started creating those trails with that?
No, we have
currently?
$12 million available. We
Okay.
had 72 million in requests for that. And we're
Okay.
just in the process of finishing up those. They're in what they're calling the portal right now through the
Okay.
budget office, kind of making sure that they're eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So for the panel there, are any of you familiar with the biking trails in and around the Bentonville, Arkansas area? Okay, so follow up, Madam Chairman. Is there any intent to use this money for a similar program here in Wyoming somewhere, and if so, where?
Mr. Harrington.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Burkhart, thank you for that question. Bentonville, Arkansas sort of sits at like a nexus in the mountain bike world. International Mountain Bike Association summits held there every year. The U.S. mountain bike team just announced a couple of weeks ago that they'll be headquartering and training in Bentonville, Arkansas, made possible by significant donations from the Walton Family Foundation. I personally don't think it's one, I think I'll say, I think it's dependent on what the community wants. It's not our intention to pick a name out of a hat and say, Kemmerer, today it's your day. We're going to, build you 100 miles of mountain bike trails. And that's the purpose behind those community collaboratives, is to really understand from a grassroots level what that community desires. I think we've seen in Bentonville, the statistics are there, that there's significant economic impact beyond the trails and in that secondary tier of economic impact in restaurants and in hospitality and tourism. So I think there's some real benefits there, but I think Wyoming is its own state and we have to do things our own way. And that is the benefit of those community collaboratives. Thank you for that question.
Do you have a follow-up? Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Okay.
Madam Chairwoman?
Oh, yes.
I would
Ms.
also add to
Anderson.
that, Representative Burkhart, in that with the TAP program, a large portion, not a large, a priority for us is planning, often so we can build out those connected trail systems within communities. So they're not just trails that are going to nowhere. They build greenways, and those greenways often spear off into communities or off to recreation centers that are near the area. So they're intended to be used as connected systems.
Right. Anything else? Representative Larson.
So with this funding, would you plan to create maps for users of these trails so it's easier for them to understand where they're going and how they're going to get there?
Ms. Sanderson?
I might have spoke too early on that one. I'm going to
Okay.
divert that to state.
Deputy Director
Madam Chairman,
Glenn.
Representative Larson, we actually have a map system right now. It's called the Wonder Map in Wyoming, and you can say, I want a mountain bike, and it will and it says, oh, you're near Casper. Here's all the trails that are near Casper. Here's the local bike shops that are near Casper. Here's all those things that are around there. And Patrick and his team are constantly working on that and helping promote those pieces. But it's everything from mountain biking to rock hounding to backcountry skiing or wanting to go to a dude ranch.
Representative Winter.
Yes, Deputy Director, is some of this money going to be used for easements across private land, and or how does that work? There must be some kind of a program to involve the public, the private landowners.
Deputy Director Glenn.
Madam Chairman, Representative Winters, I don't know that answer. Usually when proposals come in, they're baked, they're cooked. They know what they want. They already have working through the NEPA process. They're working through these other pieces. If there's a trail that goes through private land without permission, we're not going to touch it. If they want to work on getting an easement and paying the landowner for that, and that is, we've got a document that says they have that permission, we would be open to having that conversation with them.
Did you have a follow-up? Representative Winter.
But what you're saying is that the state is not going to buy easements across private land for these trails.
Deputy Director.
Madam Chairman, Representative Winter, I don't believe that's the intent of this bill, and it's not our intent.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, and stay close. I'm sure we'll have some other questions. Anyone else to, I guess we'll go to public comment. I don't see any other state agencies or local government. So anybody else want to talk on this bill from the public? Seeing no one move, I think we'll go to our Zoom participants. Let's start with Jim Roscoe, since he may be able to answer some questions. Hey, Jim.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Glad to have you here. If you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Okay, Jim Roscoe. I'm just representing myself as a private individual this morning. It's nice to see some old faces and some new ones. I guess I missed some of the earlier comments, but I don't want to just repeat these things, but it seemed like both Director Glenn and Director Reiner have covered almost everything I was about to say. I guess I could start with the fact that the bill was originated last year due to a survey. Maybe this was brought up, but it went out to every county in the state by the Wyoming Pathways Group, and the response was eye-opening. They just almost every county had something they wanted to apply for. I just didn't have the funding to do it, and I think that's how this bill came about. So I think some of these counties were looking at what other states have been doing, and I know this has been brought up a little bit already, but I looked into that and just to see that how their economy was affected by their active transportation plans, and also just basically the information I could get is that their trails and bicycle, the influence on their economy. And Utah's economy was improved by $137 million annually, just because of the bicycle tourism and people coming to ride their trails and they're active, the infrastructure that they put in for it. But Wisconsin, they had $533 million added to their economy. Arizona, 88 million, and maybe a state that's closer to our population, Vermont, had $83 million added to their economy annually because of this effort. I guess I can stand for any questions. I just think that this would help our second largest economy tremendously, and it would also help diversify Wyoming's economy a bit. And it appeals to the younger people that are either moving here or our children who are working remotely. They can work anywhere in the country or the world, actually, and they choose where they want to live, and it has a lot to do with safe schools for their children and active recreation. So I guess with that, I'll just stand for any questions.
Thanks.
I can't see myself, so I hope I'm on.
I hope you can hear us. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. Representative Singh has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is, how was it arrived that 7% of these would be allocated for administration?
Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Larson. I think that Director Reiner hit it on the head. We originally did not have anything in that because of the existing grant programs. And I think I expect that this would cause some more effort on their grant programs to administer. So I think 7% is a fair thing. That could, you as a committee could certainly decide on something different, but I believe Director Reiner brought up some good points about if there's more volume, there will be more work and more expense.
Anyone else have a question? Representative Angeles.
Madam Chairwoman and Jim, I appreciate you coming on. I actually have a question. Being a new legislator and new to the committee, I went ahead and went back and watched some of the interim meetings on this topic. And I do remember something, if tourism is a big part of this, I don't have a problem with biking and pathways. I think that's great. But why was the funding decided to come out of the general and not tourism?
Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Angeles. I'm not sure. It just seemed like it was a broader based appropriation that seemed to fit at the time. Sorry, I don't have a very good answer for that.
Thank you.
Do you have anyone else questions? Okay. Thank you, Jim. I would hope that you could stay with us for a little bit. I'm going to go to some other participants on Zoom. But if you can hang in there with us, because we might have some other questions for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will stay.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Michael Cusack.
Mr. Cusack, you are in the room, so if you want to unmute and turn on your camera.
Thank you.
Welcome. If you would introduce yourself, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, bet. I'm Michael Cusack. I'm the Executive Director of Wyoming Pathways. Madam Chairman and Committee, I appreciate your time on this topic. Panelists in the room, thanks for all your hard work on this. It's been a great partnership. And Jim Roscoe, thank you as well. Wyoming Pathways has been around for 11 years in Wyoming, and we're a not-for-profit that helps communities get everything that we're talking about today. We get permission from land managers, listen to citizens, apply for the grants, put the projects out to bid. We oversee those projects. We make sure they're built sustainably. One of the things that as Director Glenn talked about, the cost of these trails and these amenities are where they are because we build them sustainably when we partner on a project. We do that because a lot of our land managers and municipalities already have tight budgets for things like maintenance. Our organization is primarily focused around safety, economic development, mental and physical well-being, and quality of life improvements for citizens through what we call active transportation or human-powered activities. As mentioned by Ms. Sanderson, our survey we put out starting at the end of 2021, we received responses from over 40 municipalities and over 200 different citizens or folks who work for municipalities or counties asking for these types of programs, as many folks have mentioned. We totaled up based on our knowledge of these projects, and we estimated there were $100 million in requested projects to make towns safer, stronger economies, better quality of life. And, you know, especially during the COVID years, we saw a lot of need for this with mental and physical well-being. And I think those habits have stuck, which is also a great benefit to our Department of Health and the health of our citizens. One of the things I wanted to speak about, I live in Lander. Safe pathways to schools, safe routes to schools are programs that many communities have. And here in Lander, our assistant mayor, Regine Strube-Fossen, is one of the better writers of grants, regularly received TAP grants, and we're grateful for Director Reiner and his team for helping with that process and making sure those grants come through. But our Safe Routes to Schools plan in Lander will take another 10 years to complete if under the current system we were able to secure a grant every year. A lot of that need, and a lot of towns have this problem, are incomplete sidewalks in neighborhoods. We have 27 inches of snow plus 7 inches of snow just in the last 2 weeks. We have a lot of kids who are going to school, they're walking on a sidewalk, then they're jumping out in these snow lanes to finish their walk because we need to complete our sidewalks. And that's where some of that 10 years under the current system of successful applications would take us to get this program finished. So the money we're looking at here would help a number of Wyoming communities make their streets and their sidewalks complete and safer for kids to get back and forth to school. Sadly, we had a young gal hit in a crosswalk last year on her bicycle on the way to school, and those kinds of tragedies, even one is too many, and we need to do something to make sure that gets improved quickly. We talked about soft surface trails and as I mentioned, the associated costs of those. And you know, Jim Roscoe did a great job sharing economic impact. So did outdoor rec manager Patrick Harrington. You know, it's legit. One of the trails we built last year was in Thermopolis. Marianne Rush is their chamber director, and they're starting to see a whole new segment of the economy grow in that community based on, as she described it, looking out her window at the trailhead parking lot. There's a whole bunch of new cars with bike racks on them that I haven't seen in town before that are coming to our town and eating at our bars and restaurants and staying in our hotels. And that's an exciting thing to see when it's palpable, when a community sees brand new members of an economic stream they hadn't had before. Trails also create jobs and add to the economy. Again, the study that Representative Burkhart you mentioned on Bentonville is nothing short of amazing. What happened in that town. You know, I've been mountain biking since the 80s, and it used to be you mountain biked where there were lots of mountains. And if you've been to Arkansas in the South, they're not exactly known for their tall peaks, but they are now the de facto capital of the United States for mountain biking. As Patrick Harrington mentioned, the US bike team is choosing to train there because they've done such a good job with that. And all kinds of industries and businesses have sprouted up to support that. And like I said, it's about quality of life. Lastly, we have, as was mentioned by Director Glenn, the number of requests for those grants having to do with trails are because every type of user likes to get out on trails. You know, whether you're on a horse or you're on foot or you're on a bicycle, it's a great way to exercise, especially if it's close to town. I'll be brief and with these last few comments here. With the current system we have with both trail grants and TAP grants, especially with trails, as I already mentioned, it would take Lander 10 years to build out safe schools, but with trails, we're currently able to build 1 or 2 miles a year per project. And we call that, you know, just segments. These trails these places that we're working like at Pilot Hill and Happy Jack and Laramie and Johnny Behind the Rocks at Lander, they have 20 and 30 and 40 mile trail system plans that they want to see completed. And when you're building out 1 or 2 miles at a time, you get a lot of new visitors without very many new places for them all to go. And what you wind up with then is additional trail conflict. with grants of this nature, we could build out a lot of those trail systems and really create amazing facilities that would become regional destination areas for folks who like those amenities. We do know that Representative Winter's question is a good one. Wyoming Pathways, if we need to go through private land in our long history of doing this work, that's on us to work out those easements. We've had luck a couple of times. And if we don't get it, certainly we will look at new routes to finish a trail system. I just wanted to make that clear. And, you know, one more thing on the cost of these trails. What we have here is a very low cost for pathways and trails that yields year over year high return on investment. As I mentioned, we're building facilities that don't need maintenance to the degree that a lot of other projects would need. And every year you're getting more and more visitors. As Director Glenn noted, the studies I'm seeing, the average mountain bike visitor, for instance, spends about $135 per day in a community. And in many of our communities, that can happen in multiple seasons. And then last thing I guess would address Representative Angelo's question about tourism in the budget. I can't speak to that, but I can say everything we're talking about is really, in my opinion, about increasing quality of life and safety for Wyoming citizens. I think the sidecar benefit is it'll bring in a broader sector to our economy that we may not be experiencing as much yet. And I think this is one of the best ways to spend this money to see all of the things I talked about, leading off with safety and winding up with quality of life improvements. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions? Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So, Mr. Cusack, question for you on sidewalks. Who owns the sidewalks? Who's responsible for the safety, the condition, and who would be liable if there's an accident on sidewalks?
You know, I'm not an expert on that, but I can speak to what I know about Lander. It's the property owner in most cases. And so we try to work that out with helping folks either pay for that or get that scheduled to be paid for and built. And maybe folks at YDOT might know more, or others in the room would know more, but that's what I know about the city of Lander.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Cusack, you mentioned a tragic accident where a young woman was hit in a crosswalk. How would this money be available to prevent that particular accident?
There's some best practices. We shared a report last year with several groups, Judiciary Committee, TRW Committee, Transportation Committee, and YDOT on best practices for crosswalks. Some of these are more expensive to build. Some of it requires signage and blinking lights. We're not saying those things are going to happen because oftentimes these roads are under the control of other folks, but we'd like to have money, if need be, to improve safety at crosswalks. And I know they're looking at the particular crosswalk in Lander to make that safer. But again, it all comes down to money. To make it more safe requires more money.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sandra, would you like to take part of that question?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Representative Burkhart, as I understand it, and I may call Keith Fulton up here as well, but cities and counties often own the sidewalks, and that's part of the TAP program as well. The Transportation Alternatives Program is to rehabilitate some of those sidewalks so that walkers and anyone that needs to use them can use them.
Any other questions for Michael? Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess my big concern is the maintenance cost of this and who's responsible and how often is this going to be analyzed, I guess, as to what's going on with it? What do we need to do to repair it, or are the uses on it proper? This $40 million really throws me for a loop. I just can't hardly understand how the taxpayer can be responsible for that kind of money. So that's my concern.
Michael, do you want to?
Okay, Madam Chair, I wasn't sure that was a question for me. I'm not sure. You know, what I'm hearing is responsible for the maintenance costs. I can speak to soft surface trails. We have arrangements in place for a set number of years for each contract with the builder that we hire. Should there be faults or flaws with that trail or things that degrade, builders are contractually obligated to make sure it's you know, in proper working order, if you will, for a period of years. For in-town pathways, typically that would be something I believe that the municipality would take on as the responsibility to make sure they're cleared and maintained, and perhaps others in the room would be able to add to that.
So Deputy Director Glenn, would you like to speak to that?
Madam Chairwoman, Dave Glenn, usually when we're looking at our granting program, that's one of the questions that we ask is who is going to maintain that, who's going to be responsible for that moving forward. Additionally, I would throw out a piece is that the people are here and they're coming, and we have the ability to harden trails and make them happen, or as Mr. Cusick said, they build their own. And that's what we've been running into. I was out this spring, out for a walk with my dog, and there were people blasting through on their mountain bikes on a trail, and here's a sage grouse with 4 chicks, and they're blasting right between them. That's our job, is to kind of concentrate those folks, put them in a location we want, harden it, and make it happen.
Do you have a follow-up, Representative? Any other questions?
Madam Chairwoman, sorry, Mr. Roscoe is willing to provide some comment
Oh,
on that
okay.
question as well.
Yeah, let's put Jim back on. Go ahead, Jim, if you have answer.
You are muted, sir, if you want to unmute your mic.
How's that?
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Madam Chair. I'd just like to respond to Representative Winter's thing, which I think has been responded to, but I believe that would be taken care of and addressed on who would be maintaining these projects, would be in with the applicant and with the application process. And I guess the tourism question, why doesn't it come from tourism? I'm not so sure about that, except that maybe some of the tourist dollars go into the general fund, and that's where that came from. I think it's really nice to see that the matching part was brought down to 10%, and the effective date, which could be moved up to get things started, that would probably be effective. And also responding to Representative Winter's questions about the amount of money, I believe that this program will repay itself in several fold in the years to come. It's a while to get it started, but it will increase our economy and give us a little diversification in our economy. And it certainly has been profitable to other states. So that's what I'm hoping will happen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Byron?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cusack, do you have any statistics on year-over-year increases in participation in trail use or pathways statewide?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Byron. I don't have those at my fingertips, but I can tell you, and I think Patrick Crane alluded to this, it's year-over-year growth. We're on a, and I've been, like I said, in mountain biking since the 80s when there was a real boom. This is an unprecedented wave we're seeing of people, especially coming to the West and also places like Bentonville for these experiences. But yeah, I can find statistics if you like and send those on to you in the committee.
Thank you. Any other question? Representative Singh?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If Mr. Roscoe is still available, or any of you guys, why is it that going down to 10% for that match is beneficial? Why would that be a necessary change?
That's probably more of a question for Wyatt. Jim, did you want to take that?
Yeah, I just think that some of these applicants may have a hard time coming up with 20%. I think 10% was the way it originally was. That would certainly be up to the committee, but I do think that would be beneficial to get some of this stuff started. Also, yeah, that's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Jim. We can hear from Wyatt on that. They seem to have a.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that was really our suggestion. I will tell you that the Transportation Alternatives Program that we run that Ms. Sanderson talked about, we did actually change that match from 80-20 to 90-10 several years ago, based on the really difficulty of local communities coming up with the match. And as we look at making the program fundable or affordable to local communities, that was really our suggestion was, hey, let's make it match. So our Transportation Alternatives Program right now is 90-10. And I think it struck us as a good use of money to say, hey, listen, let's take some more of this corpus because that doesn't change. And there's probably, you're right, there's probably a few less projects there, but it gives the ability for less affluent communities across our state to get in the game per se. And I think for us, that was really important as you look at trying to provide equity and availability to the funds across the breadth. Otherwise, it goes to more affluent communities. And that's probably part of that process, just to make it match and make it available.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Jim, if you could hang around. Michael, if you could hang around, I think we'll move to Michael Jones.
Mr. Jones, you are in the room, so if you want to turn on your camera and unmute your microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for joining us. So if you could state your name and where you're from.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Michael Jones. I'm a Fremont County Commissioner. I've been growing in my concern about road safety and traffic safety in our outlying roads that surround Lander. By no other reason than the world has changed, we've seen a dramatic increase of bicycles and walkers on these loop roads that surround Lander. And the TAP grants are a critical, an essential part of our planning for roads because counties and cities just don't have the funds in and of themselves to take care of all of our roads. So state funds through TAP grants and federal funds are critical. And the process to get the TAP grants has become increasingly more competitive amongst municipalities and counties. And we had 2 this year that we were trying to address some extended shoulders so that we could make our roads a little bit more safe. And we weren't unable to secure either of those. So it's, as we've watched Lander in particular, but throughout the county, the increase recreation and tourism, which is great and we want, but the safety has been an issue. One of these roads in particular has limited shoulders. That's Tweed Lane, and we've seen 8 deaths on that road over 20 years, and that's a significant number for a small community. So these TAP grants are a big part of what we do as a part of the process. And typically the way that works, we'll go out for an engineering TAP grant, and then we'll come back and ask for state and federal dollars to help us with construction funds, which can be upwards of $1 million a mile. And so that's really why I'm on today. I think this bill is a great bill to give us a little bit of a boost on these and maybe spread the money a little bit farther. But there are a lot of issues on the ground, and I support this 100% and encourage you to do so as well, committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for Mr. Jones? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We're glad to have you here. We'll move on to Ms. Urberkeit, Lori Urberkeit.
There are no additional online.
All right. Any other people from the community?
Squeeze me in.
You bet. Can you state your name and who you represent?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, members of the committee.
Is the microphone on?
Microphone is
There
now
we go,
on.
perfect.
Good afternoon. My name is John Burrows. I'm here representing the Wyoming Outdoor Council. And a lot of the comments that I was going to make have already been stated, so I'll try to be pretty concise in this. We are very much in support of this bill. We see it as a really important investment to help our communities thrive and really improve quality of life around the state. A few points I'll offer quickly here. We do see a need and a significant backlog right now in a number of communities for active transportation and recreation infrastructure. That's across the state. The recent surveys that have been mentioned and research have done a good job, I think, of identifying shovel-ready projects in as many as 40 different communities. And I think you have a fact sheet that might elaborate on that a little bit more in front of you. Programs like this really help improve physical and mental health. And that's really been a topic that's been important, particularly around COVID. And I think mental health in particular in our communities, there's a really direct connection, mountains of research connecting, improved mental health and physical health with an active lifestyle and the access to the outdoors, for instance. This has been mentioned multiple times. Representative Roscoe brought this up, but we do see a driver here for economic diversification around the state and the direct and induced spending benefits to different communities, we think would be significant. And then finally, and this is actually, it's interesting, Lander has been implicated a number of times. I'm also from Lander, and I've been reflecting on this point about safety because I think it is one of the more significant aspects here. I'm a homeowner in downtown Lander. We just had, as some of you all know, a really large snowstorm 2 weeks ago. Mr. Cusick mentioned this, it was about 2 feet of snow. And there's nothing like 2 feet of snow to make you really realize the importance of good and effective transportation networks in a community. And I say this because, and to Representative Burkhart, your point you brought up about sidewalks, I have a sidewalk in front of my house. My adjacent neighbors do not. And so when you have down the street, I have an elderly couple trying to maneuver, and you see this in the snow, right? Trying to maneuver just down the street. It's almost impossible when you have a scraped sidewalk and then on both sides you have 2 feet of snow. 3 blocks down, there's a school from where my house is, and kids going to and from school. It's almost comical to watch them just stumble and blunder with the curbs not being consistent, with snow here and there. So there really is a need, and we see it in communities around the state, not just Lander. And we think this is an excellent use of one-time funds for the state, one time being emphasized in that statement. And we think it'll pay dividends down the road, making Wyoming healthier, safer, and just a more attractive place for young folks and people in general. There's something in here for everybody, I think, to live. So we really urge your support, and thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? And Representative Angeles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, correct?
Correct.
I don't know if you can give me this information, but I'd like to know how much is actually going to the safety, specifically in Lander, that has an issue with sidewalks and crosswalks, and how much is going for the natural pathways that will be for tourism. I'd like to know the breakdown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Representative Angeles, I don't have that information. I suspect there are people in this room who might have a better sense than me.
Director Glenn can probably answer that, or Sandra can probably answer that.
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Angelos, in the bill, it states that 90% goes to pathways, and I'll let Sandra kind of determine what those are, and 10%, so $4 million would go to the natural surface trails.
Did you have a follow-up, Representative? You good? Okay. Any other questions for John or anybody else? Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room that would like to talk? Please come up and state your name and your affiliation if there is one.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sam Shumway, AARP Wyoming. I'll talk loud, and hopefully a couple of previous speakers have mentioned younger residents and the importance of this investment to younger families and younger residents, and I think that's really important. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that AARP, as I think all of you know, represents people 50 and older in our state, and we have around 80,000 members in Wyoming. And an investment like this is really important. Safety, whether it's on crosswalks or sidewalks, is critical, and our members pay attention to the state's commitment to safety. And I think this sends a really positive message to older residents in the state of Wyoming. And so AARP Wyoming stands in favor of the bill. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Sam. Any questions for Sam? Nope. Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Anyone else in the room want to testify? Okay, we will close public comment and we will bring the bill to the committee. What is the committee's pleasure?
Madam Chair, at this point, I would make an amendment. Is that correct?
Well, no, I want the bill moved before we start amending. Okay, so if you want to move the bill, that would be great.
I would like to move the bill.
All right, moved by Representative Singh. Do I have a?
Second.
There's a tie. I think Representative Storr was loudest. Okay, now, at this point, an amendment would be appropriate.
So on, what is this? Page 2, line 9. I would like to strike the word 7 for 7% and change it to 5.
Okay, does everyone see that? Page 2, line 9. Strike 7 and make that 5.
And then the same on page 4, line 2.
Okay. So page 4, line 2, that 7% would change to 5%. Okay, any discussion on that? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of the amendment to change the administrative part of the bill from 7% to 5%, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, no?
No.
Okay, that fails. So then we'll move on. Are there other amendments?
Madam Chair,
Representative Larson.
I'd like to amend the bill as presented in the document we were provided. So that would be require at least 10%.
That'd be page 2.
Page 2, line 20, change that to 10%. Make sure I'm not missing anything else here.
And there's that other.
And then page 3, line 20, 10%.
Page 4.
And page 4, line 12 to 20%, as well as on page 5, line 2, I'd like to say this act is effective immediately upon completion of all acts necessary for a bill to become law as provided by Article 4, Section 8 of the Wyoming Constitution.
Okay.
I have it written down here, so I can give that to you.
All right, that'll be great. Did everyone get that? So basically, we're changing the match from 20% to 10%, and we're changing the effective date to immediately from whenever it was, the July 1st, 2023. Okay, everybody got that? Any comments or discussion on the amendment?
Question?
Okay, question being called. All those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
No.
That passes. So any other amendments? I have one. And this will just add Nordic ski trails to the list of things that are, these funds would be available for. So on page 4, line 23, we would add Nordic ski trails to the list of things. And on that same page, page 4, line 19, we would add Nordic ski trails. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no.
No.
Let's do, the chair is in doubt. All those in favor, raise their hand. All those, and I'm a 5. All those opposed? So 5-4, that one passes. Okay. Now, is there any other discussion on the bill? Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I certainly really appreciate what the intent of the bill and what we're trying to do here and build these trails. You know, being in Sheridan, I remember before they happened and after they happened. And prior to, I was a little skeptical of them, but I saw the impact they did have on the Sheridan community. There's a lot of trail systems right there at the base of the Bighorns, and they get heavily used. They get heavily used by residents, by non-residents, and it has been pretty, just a great impact on those kind of aesthetic options for folks in my community. So I really do appreciate what it's trying to do. From a personal perspective, I think just the $40 million appropriation, it does make me a bit nervous. But instead of trying to view this in a yes, no, either I do or don't support, an alternative idea, and I think it would probably be a pretty hefty amendment, was, you know, if we were to take that $40 million and let's say we put it in the state agency pool or pool A, you know, I think pool A is generating right around a 6% return. So if we kept that $40 million, we're not appropriating that money. We're letting it sit there and make money. And if we use, 6% of 40 million is, it's about $600,000, I think, give or take. I know that's not anywhere near the amount of money to do these types of projects, but that is I guess a mechanism or an option where it continues to generate that kind of money in perpetuity for these types of things to unlock some of these TAP grants. So that's just an idea. I'm certainly interested in kind of thinking about how can we get what we're going after here while not just writing a check for 40 million and kind of turn it around.
So would you like to amend the bill in that way?
Maybe if you give me a minute just to think about how I want to word it.
Representative Burkhart?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Excuse me. I know the committee worked on this long and hard over the interim, and I really dislike doing this, but I will be a no vote on this bill. $40 million is a lot of money in that. There's no input from any of the groups who would use these. There's no fees on bicycles, on cross-country skis, like there is on snowmobiles, off-road vehicles that pay for the maintenance and building of those trails. Even hunting equipment, sporting goods equipment pays an 11% excise tax. This past season, that was a non-consumptive use. That was a joke, people. No. Well, yeah, tough crowd. And we're diverting funds out of the general fund for this. A number of years ago, YDOT was put on, was taken off general funds, was given an increase in vehicle licensing fees and driver's license fees. Department of Tourism was taken off of general funds, given other funds, and they all keep coming back wanting more general funds. I think we need to look long and hard at a bill that was rejected by the House last session, and I think was rejected one other time. So I hate to do it because I know the work that goes in the interim, but I'm a no vote on the bill.
Any other comments on the bill? Did you want to have an amendment, or do you want to just vote on it, or what's your pleasure? Representative
Madam Chair?
Representative Storer.
Thank you. There is another bill to create a trust fund for outdoor recreation that we'll be looking at, and that might be a more appropriate place for Representative Western's thoughts.
Perfect.
All right. Are we ready to vote on this? Okay, if you would call the roll.
Representative Angelos?
No. No.
No, thank you. Representative Burkhart?
No.
Representative Byron?
Yes.
Representative Larson?
Yes.
Representative Singh?
No.
Representative Storer?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Western?
No.
Representative Winter?
No.
Madam Chairman Newsom?
Aye.
4 to 5. 4 ayes, 5 noes.
So that fails, and it will be laid back, Don? What's the term?
The bill is indefinitely postponed.
Indefinitely postponed. Okay, thank you so much. Then we will move on to House Bill 52, the reviser's bill. I think we have some folks here from LSO to run us through that. Can you introduce yourself and where you're from?
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Hopkinson, Staff Attorney with the Legislative Service Office, to review for the committee the House Bill 52, the Reviser's Bill, without a doubt the most exciting bill in the session. This bill, just for a little bit of background for some of the members who are newer, the Wyoming Constitution does require all bills to be single subject with 2 exceptions, the budget bill and this bill, the reviser's bill. The purpose of the reviser's bill is simply to go in and make grammatical corrections, clean up the statutes, and essentially makes every effort to avoid any kind of substantive change so that there's no concern about what is being changed by the bill draft. In looking at the bill, you're going to see a few different changes that are made, primarily grammatical, apostrophes, commas, spelling, clarity, extraneous words, those sorts of things. You'll also see changes in definitions, including the changes to statutes that are covered by this act. And the purpose for that change is simply to extend, generally speaking, to extend the definitional terms that are often at the beginning of an act all the way through to the end of what should be considered. Sometimes when additional statutes are added to the end, the correction to the definition of this act is not made, and all that does is just extend those definitions as they were originally intended. And then, of course, repealing obsolete provisions. That said, Madam Chair, I'm happy to walk through line by line if you'd like me to, or just kind of leave it at that and answer any questions.
I don't know if everybody's looked at this. This is pretty much commas and strikes from. So what's the pleasure of the committee? Would you like him to walk through each and every piece of it, or are you?
Madam Chairwoman, I think it might be beneficial, especially to newer members, to do something similar to that, explaining what we're doing. Just
Okay.
as an educational exercise, I believe we have the time.
That'll be great. We do have the time. So if you would continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also note, each of you should have received in your email a memorandum, which is kind of a cheat sheet for what these changes are and what they're for. That's particularly helpful to whoever is assigned to staff it on the floor, that they can use that in their presentation, or to present it on the floor, could use that in their presentation. Walking through the changes that we'll see on page 2, line 12 is the first change. Simply changing the location of the apostrophe to be grammatically correct in year to years. On line 22, I'm making a correction from chapter 3 of this article to article 3 of this chapter. There are no chapters in articles, only articles in chapters. On page 3, what we're doing here on line 15 through 17 is simply reordering the statutory numbers so that they will be in numerical order. And it does, you may note 14.4.1.16 does change to 14.4.1.17, and that's just to incorporate a statute that was added later. And that is dealing specifically with child care facilities certification and what qualifies as those, so that's just correcting a numerical error there. On page 4, line 1, changing the word ensure to ensure to proper use of that word, and what was obviously intended by context. On line 11, striking an extraneous and. In that paragraph, there's a whole list, and the and wasn't properly deleted in the past when additions were made to subsection B. On line 17, it's adding the word water to the state drinking water resolving loan account. There is no state drinking resolving loan account. It is the state drinking water revolving loan account.
Dang it.
Madam Chairman, is that something we should address?
I think we probably should, Representative, but not today.
My favorite account.
On page 5, correcting a spelling of fresco on line 1. And then on line 15, removing an extraneous for. If you read that sentence as a whole, there's multiple fors in there that one just needed to be removed. On page 6, lines 8 through 10, making a grammatical correction from that to when, and then updating a citation, 1719-102A should have been 25 when it was 24. Just kind of for information, because this is kind of interesting, when the bills pass and they both reference the same citation in two different bills and create a new section, we go through and have to renumber accordingly. In this case, that didn't happen, so the citation to 24 was correct in the original bill, but because two bills passed creating a new paragraph 24, it should have been renumbered to 25, and this corrects that. The bottom of page 6 on line 22, it's just correcting the name for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Commission Corps.
Madam Chairwoman, a
Representative
question, please.
Burkhart.
Thank you. So, David, at the bottom of page 6, where we add in corps instead of corp, there is a bill out there to add into all of our military definitions, Space Force, which is a new military force. Would that go into here, or will we wait till that bill passes to correct this paragraph? Because it would go in after Army, Navy, et cetera, and it would include Space Force, or should that be in the reviser's bill? It hasn't occurred yet. That bill hasn't been heard in committee yet, I don't think.
David?
Madam Chair, so long as the bill isn't changing the same, or essentially if it's not creating a conflict, it's fine, whichever one passes. So it would add the Space Force into there, but it would also still, this bill would make that correction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So you can continue.
Thank you. On page 7, line 22 is just striking of a subsection that's repealed, that doesn't exist anymore. Same thing, page 8, line 3, just removing reference to a repealed section. On page 9, lines 10 and 11, and lines 15 and 16, there was a bill in 2021 that removed any reference in these statutes to educational suitability and technology readiness. And those terms were simply missed when that bill passed in these two paragraphs. So this is just correcting that and removing terms that are no longer in use in this particular statute. On page 10, line 1, correcting the word insured in that sentence to insure, which in context is obviously what was intended, that should be referencing insurer and not insured. On line 14, simply adding a comma for grammatical correctness. On line 8 of page 11, again extending the definition of this act to include a newly created section or article that it should have been included in when that bill was created. On line 21, removing reference to a repealed section. On page 12, lines 10 and 18, just changing the use of the term government to governance for grammatical purposes. On page 13, line 6 and line 14, again extending definitions of this act to include sections or articles or chapters that should have been included with the original bill. Line 22 and 23, adding the word that, striking which, and then adding upon is for grammatical correction and clarity for that particular sentence. And finally, on page 14, line 11, removing the Q is just removing a reference again to a repealed section. And then section 2, which repeals 2116-1307C, that section concerns Hathaway success curriculum requirements for pre-2010 students and is obsolete. The act would be effective July 1st, 2023. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide more details on any of these.
Any questions? Representative Burkhart, would you like to add Space Force to that, or do you want to wait for that other bill?
Madam Chairman, no, I would wait for the other bill. They go sequentially, and the other bill will clarify that in numerous other portions of statute.
Any other comments or questions? Did I hear the question somewhere? Question being called. All those in, is there?
Move the bill.
Move the bill? Sorry, I got out of order.
Second.
So,
I moved
you
it.
moved it, okay. So Representative Burkhart moved it, and Representative Western seconded it.
Madam Chairman, may I give some brief information on this bill?
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative.
Mainly for the new people.
Okay.
And David, please add in and correct me if I'm mistaken. This comes out of the Management Council. They're the sponsor of it. But generally, it is LSO staff that prepares the bill. At one time, we had a committee to do this. I was actually on that committee, went away a number of years ago to correct some of the stuff in statute. And you can see the types of corrections here. The one, ensure rather than inshore. And it happens. During session, we run like crazy. It's 100 miles an hour and you miss some things. And it's good to correct those things. We've corrected some bizarre language that's come up in the past years. And actually, it is an important bill to make sure that our statutes are correct and are quoted correctly. You know, if you go strictly, as we joked about the drinking rather than drinking water, could have a strange connotation. As Dave pointed out, the and in that one, technically that would require that everything past that and have to be included. So an and or an or neither, that makes a big difference in statute. So this is an important bill. It looks a little different in that, but it's important to keeping order in the statutes and in the House. So thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you for that explanation. We're grateful for your a willingness to help us as we go along. David?
Madam Chair, if I could just add just a little bit to that. The way this bill does come about currently is most of it is provided by attorneys who notice things as they're going through and making drafts, but we certainly accept any comments, or if any of you ever spot anything that you think is wrong, submit it to us and we'll review it. And it may end up in the reviser's bill. We get things from agencies or even private citizens at times, so that's how that all comes into it.
Madam Chairwoman, to add to what, if I might add to what David said was, I found one and we put it in the bill years ago, and the statutes went back into the 50s and had never been updated. And the statutes referred to children with developmental disabilities as defective children. That was put into the reviser's bill to correct that language to children with developmental disabilities. That the old language was very inappropriate. And so that's some of the things the bill has done over the years. And I picked that up doing some research for a different bill, went to staff and said, we've got to change this. So it didn't take a bill management agreed to just put that in the reviser's bill. Thank you.
Representative Western?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Hopkins, you said it's LSO attorneys that catch them and they just kind of make note and compile them all in a bill.
Madam Chair, that's, yes. Primarily, the majority of these amendments have come from attorneys who've been doing work, and then they send it to me as the attorney currently this session being assigned to it, so.
Madam Chairwoman, is there a underground betting pool on who can discover the most of these things?
Madam Chair,
You can invoke your Fifth Amendment.
I can neither confirm nor deny any betting pool.
That's great. Any other comments or questions?
Madam Chair.
Representative Storr.
Thank you. I'm just curious why our committee was assigned this bill and just does it rotate around different committees?
I am not going to speculate on the thought process of leadership.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions or comments on this? So we will go ahead and vote. Barb, if you'd like to call the roll.
Representative Angelos,
Yes, aye.
Representative Burkhart.
Aye.
Representative Byron,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Singh,
Aye.
Representative Storer,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Western,
Aye.
Representative Winter,
Aye.
Madam Chairman Newsom.
Aye.
9 aye.
Okay. Thank you so much for helping us through that. I guess we will adjourn. If anybody has any questions, ask Representative Burkhart.
Madam Chairwoman, do you wish to assign this bill to someone?
Oh, I do wish to assign it to Representative Western.
I would have picked someone different, but
Okay.
thank you, Madam
I
Chair.
was directed by leadership. Not going to comment on leadership.